Lights are on. It's going to be here before you know it. Here we go. Team.
It's going to be here before we know it. I know it. It's a Thursday night, Hall of Fame game. Get to watch the Texans and probably a good deal of backups going against a bunch of other backups, but perhaps a Caleb Williams sighting. And it was a good week. I'm gonna call this a week because it was 7 practices. So let's just call it a week. And they didn't take a day off to honor the Lord. So 7 practices over the last 10 days or so, and at times very chippy, at times a little bit scary. I know a lot of you have seen this clip already, but in case you haven't, CJ Stroud was stepped on yesterday by Foley Fatukasi, one of the larger human beings on a roster full of large human beings for the Houston Texans. And it was a little bit scary because CJ was limping for a little bit. When it's sloppy out there, and it's been raining a bit. The defensive linemen wear their 7 studs. So instead of like molded cleats stepping on CJ's precious feet, it was probably a spike or 2 or 3. And he was limping, but he ended up actually having probably the best series for the offense of the day. Was their final team series. They drove down the field. I think in the situation they had to get a touchdown. They didn't get it, but they drove the field. Regardless, CJ looked all right by the end of practice. I didn't notice anything or hear anything afterwards, and this was DeMeco Ryans kind of being coy as he answered a question about CJ Stroud.
No concern on CJ at all. He's doing great, having a great camp.
No, he meant about fully stepping on his foot.
No concern with CJ at all. He's doing great.
I like that. DeMeco is loosening up a little bit. I've got a new outro at the end of this video if you make it all the way through. I've got KHOU tonight, so I can't go longer than like an hour or so. But the offensive line we'll get to. We've got some Bobby Slowik later on. We've got Dameon Pierce. We've got Dalton Schultz. But in terms of chippiness, potential injuries, everything else like that, it was pretty clean other than the one kind of fight followed by a curious incident that involved Derek Stingley hitting Dalton Schultz when Dalton Schultz wasn't looking. I've got a couple things on that, but the response from Dalton Schultz, one of those two parties, Dalton's the only one who's spoken since then. The response from Dalton Schultz is about what I would have expected when asked about if there's any hard feelings after that altercation.
To scuffle, dust up the other day.
It's just football stuff, bro. It's just football shit.
No hard feelings?
No.
Yeah. Cody Suits asking the question, and Cody Suits looking for a follow-up, and Dalton wasn't going to say a thing about it. I'm guessing, like I've told you guys a few times, this stuff is usually left on the field. If because of the nature of Derek Stingley kind of going a little bit psycho in a little ways and blindsiding Dalton Schultz after everybody was walking away from it, Derek's not a dirty player whatsoever. Like, he is a technician, and he is very quiet though. Sometimes still waters run deep. If there had to be any extra conversation about that, then so be it. But Dalton Schultz is, despite having gone to Stanford and despite not being all that great at run blocking, he's like a tough, chippy guy. He gets into it quite a bit with guys on the field. And I think he just, like he said, it's just football stuff, bro. Somebody had a question that I saw. I want to get through a few. Of these before we take too many questions, because I know a lot of them are about the offensive line and the tight ends. So we'll talk about the tight ends with Dalton Schultz. This one from Zach. I've noticed a lot of other teams are not in pads yet. The Texans are. Is that a good thing? So the reason for that is that because of the Hall of Fame game, the Texans could show up in practice a week early. They have to show up a week early because they get 2 weeks of practice before their first preseason game. I think ultimately it's going to be a good thing, because they can get more work in, but for the veteran players, they can load manage them. Like Will Anderson wasn't out there yesterday, and he looked fine. He was watching. I think he was just getting a rest day. He was out there. He looked like a Maine fisherman. He was like, I know it was raining, but it's still Houston. I know I was sweating, and I was wearing a polo and shorts. But he was out there just all bundled up like a lobsterman or something, and he should be all right. As far as the tight ends, other than Dalton Schultz, the Brevin Jordan, like DeMeco just loves Brevin Jordan. Slowik loves Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan is not a classic tight end that you can really use in line and expect him to block a lot. He's kind of undersized. He's willing, just like Dalton. Dalton's very willing to block. They're just not that good at it. So I do think that just as much as DeMeco has kind of brought up Brevin unprompted at times about how he's a guy that they point out all the time. And you remember the long touchdown last year. I think they're going to look at him as a guy that they can get opportunities to break him free, especially when so many people are going to be fixated on the wide receivers and Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon if he ever practices again. We've got some Bobby Slowik on Joe Mixon coming up. So Cade Stover is the big X factor. Cade Stover is only in his third year of playing tight end full time. And I think I've seen some good things out of there. I mean, he's a scrappy dude, like he's a former linebacker, and he gets out there, and even though nobody's tackling, it almost looks like he's eager for contact, almost like a stretched out Dameon Pierce. And he's got a relationship with CJ Stroud. He hasn't had a lot of chance to catch passes from CJ Stroud because he's not working with the ones. But I think those will probably be your three tight ends. There's some stuff on Skowronek here later too. I know he's not a tight end, but he's also not a fullback. People are going to have questions about Skowronek just based on his jersey number alone. Speaking of Mixon, Bobby Slowik was on the Green Light podcast. It's an excellent interview that Chris Long gives him. Chris Long is great. But this is Bobby Slowik talking about Joe Mixon. This is a little clip that I didn't intend to slip in here, but I want to keep this thing cohesive as possible.
You see really quickly why he was able to do what he did. We're here in OTAs, and I mean, he's hitting things on the GPS that everyone's like, wow, that's incredible.
Okay, so hitting things on the GPS. He's not talking about like Joe Mixon's ability to deftly navigate on a GPS. He's talking about the tracking system that they use to monitor how fast they're moving, how many miles they're running in a given practice, all that stuff, just to help with that load management. But guys get kind of competitive about the speed stuff too. It's a really cool thing because guys get instant feedback on just how well they're moving and everything. They get competitive with each other. But some of the speculation about Joe Mixon last year was people thought, okay, well, some of his metrics aren't as good. Maybe he's not breaking tackles as well as he used to, or getting as much running after contact. And, I watched film. I watched the Texans game versus the Bengals, and I didn't see a physical difference. It's hard to measure these things necessarily with your eyeball. But it was really, more than anything, a difference in scheme. And the next guy we're going to talk about, Stefon Diggs, I think there were the same reasons for his decline at the end of the season, or over the back third of the season, was that they made a scheme change. And after hearing Bobby Slowik talk about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. That'll be, that's actually right here. This is Bobby Slowik talking about Stefon Diggs.
One thing I think that people underrate with Diggs is how good of a ball in hands player he is. He is a very, very good runner when he has the rock. I was not expecting what I saw once he caught the ball. And there were a lot of underneath catches he had that I think most receivers in the NFL were probably getting 10 yards on, and Steph was taking them to the house, or he was taking them for 25.
Yeah, and that's the really cool thing about watching him. I mean, and I've told you guys, I can't say it enough because I genuinely feel it every time I talk about standing out there. And watching those three receivers on the field at the same time, when there's Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Stefon Diggs, it's just so unique. There's hardly ever that situation in the NFL where you've got three guys quite like that have already established themselves. And I know Tank especially is very young, and I know we have injury concerns, all that stuff. But man, when those guys are out there, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, and it's hard not to imagine the possibilities. I think CJ has been targeting Stefon Diggs quite a bit. I saw a couple people today talking about how it looks like Diggs will be the number one guy if you're thinking about it for fantasy purposes. I would hold off on that right now, just because I think that CJ is likely really trying to form that relationship with Stefon Diggs. And I think it's premature at this point to worry about, like, as a football fan, I don't care one bit who's the leading receiver out of those three. I just want them all to stay healthy and to be as menacing as they are. If you're fantasy or if you're in gambling, then that's a whole nother concern. I still couldn't tell you. I think it's going to be a week by week thing. I think there's going to be some game plans and defenses they face where Tank goes off, and then another where Nico goes off and Stefon Diggs goes off. I cannot recommend you drafting any of those guys because I think no matter how good they are, there's just no way to predict which guy's going to have an extra 3 or 4 games. I would say if what you're looking for is consistency, I think that might end up being Nico, just because with some of the connection over the middle. So if you're a fantasy owner and you just want consistency week to week, I think that might be Nico. Some of that steady diet of stuff over the middle where you know that he's definitely going to get yards after the catch because he breaks so many tackles. That's what I'm leaning towards right now. But Dalton Schultz spoke yesterday about Stefon Diggs and his leadership.
Steph's a very vocal guy. And he brings energy and juice to every room that he walks in. So, that's something that, we had some vocal guys last year, but I don't think we had anything kind of to what he's been so far. And, dude, it's been great. Like having that juice, that emotion, that like you can just tell like he's competitive as hell. Like when he steps out, like he wants to like just win everything all the time. Like he wants to win the race, jogging off the field. Like, he's just that kind of dude. And when you surround yourself with guys like that, like it's contagious.
Yeah, and I don't think this is not inconsistent with what the people in Buffalo still say when they talk about Stefon Diggs. Whatever the issues were, whatever the cryptic social media posts and any blow-ups on the sideline, whatever, like that has zero to do with just how competitive he is. And I did think as I was watching that interview of Chris Long of Bobby Slowik on Chris Long's show, Chris Long brought up the whole diva thing and, said, well, is he a diva or is he just a guy that cares about winning a lot? I'll make a comparison. There's not a direct comparison at all, but I think there's elements to it, which I would say Draymond Green. Like Draymond Green, no matter how much you might feel for him or against him or whatever, I don't think anybody calls Draymond Green a diva, right? I don't think he's not pretty enough to be a diva for one, but he also just it's more that he is kind of that Patrick Beverly mode, that guy that's just so hyper competitive that sometimes you're going to piss people off. And Draymond Green will piss everybody on his own team off at times. I think Steve Kerr, one of the best things he's been able to do is actually manage that side of the relationship. But when Draymond Green has had issues with people like Kevin Durant, it was Draymond being PO'd that Kevin Durant wasn't doing what he was supposed to do within their scheme. And I could see Stefon Diggs kind of being that way. I think sometimes receivers, when they get pissed, it's not just that they're not getting the ball, it's that the offense also isn't running the way that it's supposed to. And in terms of what Bobby Slowik was saying about how good he is underneath, that's what the Bills did last year when they fired Ken Dorsey and brought on Brady, the offensive coordinator. They started using Diggs underneath a lot more and on shorter routes and intermediate stuff. And in a lot of ways, I think, they were expecting him to do some of those things that Bobby was talking about, and he did, but that he was also a good decoy, and he was also a good guy to try to open things up downfield by attracting defenders up to the line of scrimmage. So, it wasn't always pretty. The offense did get better because Josh Allen started spreading the ball around more, but there was a lot going on there that led to the decreased production, but it wasn't like they weren't still using him. I think they were just using the threat of him in different ways. The upside of that is that if the Texans were to use him in the exact same way, he would have way more production just because Tank Dell and Nico Collins are attracting attention downfield. And since we're wrapping up the week, I would say John Mechie, I think, even though he had to sit out that day or two, that whatever the issue was, he came back and looked really good after he came back. So like John Mechie's been putting together some pretty good days. I was talking to a guy from a fantasy website who at the beginning of training camp had thought like, wow, Mechie might have a hard time making the team. And I don't blame him. I think that's probably what you would think with all these studs out there, but he looks like a different guy. It's really fun to watch him try to emulate Stefon Diggs, because there's some similarities there just in stature and the way they run routes. So Mechie's not there yet, but I can see Mechie working at it. The competition between the offense and the defense. So the last couple days have not been splendid for the Texans offensive line. Yesterday, I feel like it was downright miserable, especially in the run game. Like any run to the left just got wiped out when we're talking ones versus ones, first team offense versus first team defense. Mario Edwards Jr. and Foley Fatukasi. Like the reason Foley Fatukasi stepped on CJ Stroud's foot was because it was one of many opportunities he would have had to step on CJ Stroud's foot. He shouldn't have done it. Should have veered off. Sometimes it's hard when you're on the inside because you come free and you're just like, for one, you're not all that accustomed to it. Foley Fatukasi is not Warren Sapp, but he looked like him yesterday, which leads to, well, yeah. Okay, so what's going on in the interior of the offensive line? I'm not going to make excuses for the offensive line. They are young and they need the work. There is like a hyper vicious competitiveness by the defensive line right now when it comes to all those defensive tackles who are competing for a spot on the team. And they're all veteran dudes, and they know a lot of ways to just flat out take advantage of younger guys in practice. So I'm not panicking about it yet, but it's a really good reminder that, okay, for one, we really need Laramy Tunsil back. I think Blake Fisher is what I thought he would be, which is he's got a lot of potential, looks plenty athletic. He looks 100% athletic enough to be a good offensive tackle. That hasn't been the issue. It's just he's a taller guy that plays with a high pad level at times. He's got to learn to sink his hips a little bit better and how to handle power and just keep refining his technique. So all those things where a lot of people thought this is a guy that, man, he should have stayed in school one more year. Probably could have been a first rounder if he had stayed one more year. He's spending that senior season with us. And, I'm not saying he can't come along. It's just he's not there right now. And it might happen over the next 3 weeks. It might take 5 months, might take somewhere in between. We'll see. But this is DeMeco on the competition between the offense and the defense.
I tried to poke him a little this morning. I told him we're gonna break the record of getting the ball out again today. So it's all in competitive spirit, right? We all love each other, work well together, but we also show that competitive fire as well.
Okay, I lied. That one was DeMeco talking about the offensive coordinators and the defensive coordinators going at it. So Slowik versus Matt Burke and DeMeco Ryans. And the one thing Slowik did yesterday, this is when you can tell that even though you go in and you do talk to the other side about, okay, well, I want to work on this. What do you want to see? All that. I think DeMeco, as much as possible, tries to make it a competition for everybody. And this goes back to what they do in San Francisco. So they're trying to beat the other guys in a lot of those team periods. And we talked about how hyper aggressive the defensive line is. There's ways that offensive coordinators can take advantage of that. We saw it in the Super Bowl last year with some of the things Kansas City did to Nick Bosa. I think sometimes when we try to overly simplify this defense, which is the 49ers defense is very similar to the Texans defense, obviously. They were still running a version of DeMeco's defense, just not well enough to Kyle Shanahan's liking. But so your defensive ends, they're coming off the edge. They're lining a wide 9, cocked out wide outside the offensive tackle. And they're just supposed to get into the backfield. There's a couple cues that you're still supposed to be looking for along the way. As everything's going by at warp speed, you're still supposed to be looking for like an end around misdirection. You got to be conscious of bootleg. You need to be very conscious of screen at times. And you just got to get kind of some of those cues in your mind. And if you don't, and if all you're trying to do is just get as deep into the backfield, no matter what, good offensive coordinator is going to take advantage of that. So yesterday, Bobby Slowik, he ran an end around. I think it was with Tank Dell. They ran a wide receiver pass, which was Stefon Diggs to Tank Dell. Mechie. It was Stefon Diggs to John Mechie. It was a nice throw, but I think it might have been underthrown a little bit. The people in the stands had a better view of it than we did in the media. And who broke it up? Jimmy Ward broke it up. But I think they were trying to exploit some of the hyper aggressiveness of the defense. And that is another thing where I'm trying to trying to take it with a grain of salt with the offense. That, all right, defensive line is just, they're trying to show up. Those tackles especially. And the old heads, like DeMeco Autry and all the other guys that are 30 years old or older, are out there really trying to prove themselves. DeMeco's making the team, but there's just, it's a really cool. I was talking to Jerry Hughes' wife after practice, and I told her, I was like, man, that's just, looking at these guys, like that's a fun D-line room, like in a very professional way. They just got a lot of wisdom in there, which is another thing I get excited about for Will Anderson, just the amount of wisdom they've got in that room. A couple more clips, and I'll take some questions, and then a few more clips after that. This is Bobby Slowik on CJ. Since we actually haven't talked specifically about CJ all that much, it's he's not an afterthought, certainly. It's just there's a lot more going on, and CJ's we're looking at him as kind of like, okay, that's your solid dude. You got him, hopefully for 20 more years. But here's Slowik on CJ.
Goes outside the numbers.
This is on the Green Light podcast yet again. So he says when he throws outside the numbers,
It's like somewhere between 15 to 20 yards on the sideline, last in the progression, snapping back to it, not when it's number one. That's rare that, someone can do that.
Yeah, and I did a video on Bobby Slowik talking about CJ that you guys can go peruse after this if you like. But it was funny because I threw some videos in there to demonstrate what he was talking about, and it took me about 3 minutes to grab 3 videos. I went to the Bengals game, and in the Bengals game especially, that was at a point in the season where teams had seen that CJ was really good at throwing those outs at 10, 15, 20 yards, and it was a steady diet of him in the first part of the season. Then round about the Carolina game, the Cincinnati game, and around there, people started jumping it, and like CJ had to lace. Remember that one to Tank Dell that I think was ruled a reception, but maybe shouldn't have been, but it was just a beautiful pass. So that took about 3 minutes. Then Bobby talked about how good CJ is in a muddy pocket. That took about 2 minutes to find a couple examples of that. That Cincinnati game was just a masterpiece in a lot of ways. And it was good too, because like that was one of the only, the combination of maybe the play call and then CJ's decision making and throwing that late interception. That was one of the few mental blemishes that we saw anybody have. Like between Bobby, CJ, and DeMeco, the number of mental errors or game management decisions or just boneheaded mistakes that even really good coaches make, they were almost non-existent. And I tell people outside the market that a lot when they ask about DeMeco, because I think DeMeco's gonna get looked at as this guy that's what did Terry Bradshaw say about Mike Tomlin, that he's a rah-rah guy or something? I can anticipate people thinking that, and it's such an underestimation of, I think, how involved DeMeco is with everything, and how much he understands about the psychology of players. A, B, just his skill as a defensive coordinator. C, how he's a resource for the offense because he's a good defensive coordinator because he understands offenses. But then D, I think that the modern NFL coach who can embrace analytics but also have the old school sentiment is going to make way fewer game management errors. If anything, we might end up at some point where, DeMeco's going to make one of those decisions that all the analytics say is what you should do, but like all your football instincts are like, no, you go for it, or no, you kick the field goal. He listens, and I think he's talking to the right people about replays. He's talking to the right people about in-game situations. And it's been really cool because he's a rookie head coach. So that's why I compare him to AJ Hinch in some regards, when you've got a former player who gets and understands that side of it, but who very much understands and appreciates the value of the analytics. So exactly, how much can you actually feed that to your players? How much is actually worth using? Like CJ's all about that. And it's really cool because he's never going to brag about it or anything. He's not going to be like some former members of the Shanahan tree who can't help but show off in press conferences reciting plays in a row and stuff like that. It's just it's not DeMeco's deal. So this is DeMeco on the defense setting the tone.
what I love about our defense is from these past 2 days is they set the tone. And that's what we have to be as a defense. We want to be tone setters.
Yeah. And that goes along the lines of what we were just talking about. I think that's what they look like out there. The chippiness that led to the confrontation a couple days ago, it did tamp down the next day, but it was kind of cool because I think what you saw was the defense was making a really concerted effort to be sure they were squaring guys up because then they're allowed to hit them. I saw Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward and Dameon Pierce. I know people are frustrated with Jimmy Ward at times because he's been injured a lot, right? Jimmy Ward knocked Dameon to the ground. Dameon got up to keep running, and Jimmy Ward knocked him down again. Dameon got up again and kept running. It was just like two guys that would never actually take offense to anything like that, but he squared him up to do it. So we saw a lot of thumping, but it wasn't, as guys were going to the ground or some of the stuff that like the defense was towing the line a little bit too much. This is DeMeco and Al-Shaair on the Texans Instagram. They just put this out. It was when DeMeco was mic'd up. But in terms of setting the tone, this is a conversation DeMeco was having with Al-Shaair. Whoops. That's my footage that I filmed or got from Texans commenter. We'll play that as I prattle on later. Here we go.
Make sure everybody understands that we on the red zone.
So what you think the offense trying to do? Difference is, but we always set the tempo. They got to match your energy. Not the other way around.
Yeah. So that's Al-Shaair. Like he's been everything that people said he would be. He's an old school linebacker. Like he looks at it like that's his defense. He gets guys lined up. He tells them when they screwed up, and like everybody seems to be super cool with Al-Shaair. And he's a lot like DeMeco. He runs sideline to sideline. He's been really fun to watch because he shows up all the time. It's what you tell the young guys: just show up. Be sure you show up every day. You want to show up in the frame at the football. Show up. You're gonna screw up a bunch. You're a dumb rookie, but just show up, make plays. And Al-Shaair is out there. When you look at the guy that's been in the league 6 or 7 years, and he's out there running around like a rookie trying to make the squad. It's really cool to see. Let's take some questions before we get to Skowronek. Skowronek's one of the guys that's kind of interesting. Oh, boy, you guys have a lot of. I'm not going to be able to get to nearly all of these. I'll just keep pounding them out. Kenyon Green still seems to be showing the same flaws from the first year. Let people through for sacks, for random penalties. Have we seen real progression there? I think I have. And one thing I'll say too, Brandon, I've seen a couple. How do I say this? I will very, very, very rarely point the finger at an individual offensive lineman when somebody gets through for a sack in training camp, because it's just way too hard without the benefit of replay to always know exactly what the protection was supposed to be. And, usually you're catching it out of the corner of your eye. I'll say the interior offensive line, or from the center out to left tackle while Blake Fisher is still out there, it's been concerning. There's been good moments out of all of them, but in terms of consistency, and like the play that you might have seen written about was a play where Al-Shaair on a dog came right through the B gap between Kenyon Green and Blake Fisher. And I saw one place right that he ran right by Kenyon Green. It was 5-man protection, and on a blitz and 5-man protection, there's as good a chance that was actually Blake Fisher's linebacker to block, not Kenyon Green. And so it's just, I would say as a group, each one of them has shown some good things, but there's been other times where they look really young, and that's what they are. So I can't get overly alarmed about it at this point, because you're relying on those guys getting better by facing really good competition every day. And I think the defensive tackles, not just as a product of who they're going against, the defensive tackles have been playing their asses off. And each one of those guys just knows that their spot's not guaranteed. You got a bunch of veteran dudes who all, if they get cut, are probably like, I'll be surprised if there's not, of let's say the 6 or 7 defensive tackles right now, I think whichever ones don't make this team, most of them are going to be on another roster somewhere. So, and those guys all know it and they can feel it. So they're really fighting out there, and it's hard to pick one out. Like they've all had their moments, but it's but I'm not, be concerned, but it's, it's kind of like I was concerned about the center field position in 2022. I was like, yeah, how the hell they got a 20-game lead, and I'm just stressed about the center field position. And then Chas McCormick goes, and he's a hero in Philly. He's not a hero in Philly. In Philly, he was a hero to us. Does that make more sense? DeMeco seems to really like Lassiter. We've got a little bit of Lassiter coming up. Did you hear Brevin Jordan the other day? I think he might break out this year. He seems focused and pumped. Yep, I think we talked about him a little bit earlier. I think Brevin. I don't know if breakout's the right word, because he's still. He's not an every down tight end. He's not an inline tight end. Is he Evan Ingram? He's not as athletic as an Evan Ingram, I don't think. So he's somewhere in between. He's a guy who can go out and play in the slot. He's a guy that can line up as a tight end and be a receiving threat there. He can be in the backfield. So I don't want to call him a gadget guy. It's just going to be a unique role, I think. So whatever breakout means, I would say I think they might more steadily rely on him this year. But I don't think it's going to be a steady diet of Brevin Jordan. I think he's going to be the guy that teams slip up and Brevin Jordan torches them like he did last year on that long touchdown run. YouTube played one of your earlier lives. Someone said it's like we're sitting on the couch chatting. That's it. You're just talking to us and taking our few. Yeah, but can you imagine if you were sitting on the couch with me and I talked for 31 minutes and 13 seconds without actually letting anybody else talk? You wouldn't like me so much. That's what Teddy Roosevelt used to do. There's this old story. These old-time politicians, back when either attention spans were longer or people just had nothing better to do, they would just blab and blab and blab. Okay. I guess that's what, honestly, this is bipartisan. Trump just gets up and kind of ad-libs, right, at his rallies for quite a long time. So I guess it's just those people that have that ability to connect with people, whatever it is. Teddy Roosevelt was meeting with a heavyweight champion. I can't remember who he was, but he came to the Oval Office, sat down and talked to Teddy Roosevelt for like 90 minutes. And afterwards, somebody said, so what did you say to the president? And he said, I told him my name. And that was it. It was Teddy Roosevelt filling in the heavyweight champ on boxing for like the next 90 minutes. That's what this live stream is exactly like me being exactly like Teddy Roosevelt. Hyped for the defense. I'm hyped for the defense as well. Correlating question. How have the linebackers looked so far at camp? That is an excellent question. So I think Henry To'oTo'o looks like he's improved on a lot of things that I was concerned about. I think last year when he had a chance to play in the games, because he's been playing a lot with Christian Harris out, it's usually Al-Shaair and Henry To'oTo'o out there at the Mike and Will linebacker. He looks like he's hitting his run fits better. It looks like he's getting to his spots and coverage better. It looks just much smoother and quicker and snappier. So he's looked good so far. I don't know when we start getting nervous about Christian Harris. I think whatever it is, I suspect that it's muscular or something of the variety, or at least soft tissue, but not that big a deal. So we'll see. It's just with zero information at all. I'm guessing somebody will probably ask DeMeco about him. Al-Shaair, I feel really good about. The Sam linebacker is going to be a battle, and I should probably do a video on that and really put some. Maybe that's who I'll watch tomorrow. It's frustrating trying to watch the linebackers from field level, because there's just there's always somebody in between you and them. So I might sneak up and sit in the top row of the stands tomorrow. If you see me, I'm going to look like a scout, trying not to disclose my identity. That's me. I'll be up in one of the corners of the bleachers with my iPhone on 4K. Because when you record on 4K, you can zoom in a little bit better. But you got to remember you got to delete afterwards. It sucks up a lot. Let's see. Any initial thoughts on cut candidates that stands put? Okay, you know what? Excellent question. And I'm going to write that down as a note to go along with the linebackers for tomorrow, because I don't want to get that. I don't want to get into that just yet, because for one, there's so many guys on the second and third and fourth teams that you don't have any time to really spend watching them long enough. So guys will flash and other guys won't. And you just don't want to jump to conclusions. And then And almost as much because it's one thing, I don't want to tear some kid down that doesn't deserve it, but also I don't want to build somebody up and have everybody think that, this guy's going to have his family. Cause I've got family members of players who watch this. I don't want that family member watching this, hear it from my mouth and think they're like, oh yeah, my kid's made the squad. And then bam, back to college. Ugh. I like that Schultz says he spent the offseason working on his run blocking. Yeah, and that, like I said, it's not like he lacks for effort in run blocking. He's just got to keep working on the technique side of things. I think Cade Stover is the one I'm really intrigued by because it's a huge – I mean, it's not as simple as just working on it. Some guys just don't have a knack for blocking, especially when you've been a defensive player your whole life. He's only been playing tight end for 2 years. In some ways, maybe it's good that he doesn't have that much experience blocking because he doesn't have that many bad habits to try to correct. And I think he got pretty good coaching at Ohio State. They tend to do all right with people. They did pretty well with their quarterback. Let me do the rest of our audio, and then I'll take some more questions.
Skowronek does a great job when it comes to special teams, does a great job of communicating, offense, being able to play multiple spots, tough guy. Likes to get in there, get his nose bloody, block a little bit. So I like the physicality of Skowronek, and I like how smart he is, and I like how he really does a great job of communicating.
Yep. So like Skowronek would be a guy, even though he's been in the league for a few years, he's a perfect example of, man, I've noticed Skowronek a few times. Seems like it was rainy out there. Skowronek was chippy as we got some rain coming in. Oh, I wish you guys know how much I screw up the technical stuff. I wish I could wheel the camera around. Maybe I'll do it. Okay, let's see how this goes. It's cool up here because you can see. You see that line that looks like clouds at the bottom of it? That's actually the rain coming across Bel Air and West U. All that high-priced real estate. It's pretty. It's nice up here. Feeling peaceful now. And here, I'll show you more. You can see NRG off. That's my ring light. The medical center to the left, and I think NRG is right behind the ring light there. So sometimes I look back there and reminisce. Back when I was somebody, damn it. I'm a nobody. Just a bum. So Skowronek. I was saying, Skowronek is a guy that I hesitate to get too bullish on, other than to say he shows up. I was really intrigued the first day at camp because remember when he was with the Rams a couple of years ago, there was a stretch of like 3 games where they used Skowronek as a fullback a lot. And it worked really well. He had like 1 or 2 games where he really went off. And then they kind of, teams figured out what they were doing with him, and the Rams went away from that. But like all of that blocking ability by wide receiver standards, he's not built like a fullback. He's not going to be a fullback. But when the first day we got out there, he has like he's number 23 or something. I don't know what 20 something, which is rare for a wide receiver. So that first day I watched, and he's been doing nothing but wide receiver drills. So special teams will matter for him. But when the rain came through, the thing that first diverted my attention, when the rain came through these last couple of days, he got like extra chippy. He was getting after it. So he's intriguing. I think there's a lot of intriguing guys there, but I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, wow, he's really showed up and he's going to make the team. The Rams moved on from him for a reason. Maybe the Texans feel like they can use him in a way that the Rams didn't, just because of the composition of our team. Next question. Dameon. Dameon. Let's talk about Dameon Pierce for a little bit. And I know I did a video on Dameon Pierce the other day, but that was before he had spoken in the press conference. So just a few clips from Dameon that I really liked. First, just his personality. This is Dameon wanting to take his time and kind of ease into the press conference, but people started hammering him with questions right away.
Oh, the interview starting right now? Hey, how y'all doing too? I love y'all too.
Yeah. So like he hasn't lost his charisma or charm. That's just as good as it's ever been. He's been very sharp out there. When he does have blocking in front of him, which there are it was just yesterday it was ugly on the left side, but in general, there have been times they've had some good runs in camp. It's not like the ones are always just bereft of any success on the ground game at all. It's just these last couple days, it's been kind of dicey, yesterday especially. So, like, he's looked decisive. He's had the one cut and go where he's making his decision on these zone blocking schemes, which we'll talk about here in a second. Last year, there was a whole lot of stutter stepping at times and a whole lot of indecision. And when you couple that with an offensive line that's not the best in the world, that just gives the defense too much time to swarm you. This is Dameon on what it was like last year and how it feels now.
Like last year was a lot of what was this on that play? Like is this outside zone read? Is a mid zone read? Like, you know, all the cobwebs are gone from that.
Yeah. And that's what it's looked like. So all the cobwebs are gone from that. As he talks about the, you know, whether it's an outside zone, mid zone, all that, it's, you know, you go from a scheme where you know where the hole is drawn up to be, you plan on the hole being there, and then you ride that hole to glory. Damn it. You ride that blocking to glory, damn it. And it's murkier than that. And one of the things Arian Foster was so good at was just his vision and his feel for the cutback in that zone blocking scheme. The scheme's changed through the years. And, you know, since Kubiak was here, a lot more cut blocking was allowed back then, which made it easier for the running backs. You know, didn't make it easy, but it made it easier. Now the picture's a lot murkier because the defensive linemen aren't on the ground as much, and you got to really work to read exactly what's going on with the blocking. And I guess the big question just becomes, all right, you need vision for that. You need to really be able to scan the field and see things out of your peripheral and take it all in. Like with Arian, it was like poetry. You know, like Arian would just kind of, in the rhythm of the play and feeling how the defense was playing to it, he would just understand where he could hit it up that crease. And it's way too early to say whether or not Dameon or Jawar Jordan or any of these other guys have that feel for it. But he's looked a lot better than he did this time last year. One thing, this was really good. And I believe this was from a question by Landry Locker. I'm not sure. Landry had some good questions yesterday. This is a great perspective on how he struggled last year. This is a guy you could tell he's put some thought and work into himself in the offseason.
Yeah, 5 years from now, bro, I'm going to be able to say that year 2 was my best year. Probably not on paper, but the process and the growth that I had mentally is going to be something that's carry over to every year that I play in this league.
Yeah, and, you know, taking that growth mindset of like, all right, hey, it's only a failure if you don't learn anything from it, right? That's the old saying. If you fail and then you just say, well, I'm done, I'm going off to play basketball. Like, all right, well then, yeah, you genuinely failed. If you take something from it and you learn from it and you become better because of it, then there you go. And Dameon, you know, I played the clip yesterday, so I didn't want to play it again today. But Dameon just, you know, flat out just said that he didn't really do the things that he needed to do last year, and he needed to take accountability for that. You know, Caserio, when he was on with Sean and I, kind of, you know, we have no idea what Caserio was talking about, like what situation, but Caserio said that there was a lot more going on than just football with Dameon. So I think if anything, like maybe Dameon, I hope he's not being too hard on himself, but he's that kind of kid that whatever the obstacle was, I believe that it was probably a serious one. You know, it's not like he's not a guy that can't fight through a lot of things. Yeah, he kept running with the damn helmet off back there in college, you see, back there in Florida, when they actually gave him the ball. Idiots. This was a surprise to me though too. Like Dameon actually has dark places to go to.
Just going through it like that, man. I just know, like, my mom, she's somebody I lean on a lot of times. Like, now I hate to say it, but like when I get in my moods, you know, I get the moods where I don't want to talk to nobody, and she understands that, but she keep pushing me. She like, hey, I know you mad right now, but I'm here. I still love you, and I just want to apologize to her publicly. Like, you know, Mom, I'm sorry. I still love you. You know, ain't no love lost.
What if Dameon's a monster? What if he's really a monster? This rosy demeanor. He's too good to be that way. But I think he's very emotional, you know, and like sometimes that emotion, it doesn't always stay within all the seams that you've built up. Sometimes those seams burst, and he's a guy that's passionate and cares about things. And I think he is kind of like, different in a different manner than Will, but Will's very, very tough on himself too. And like that's, Matt Burke has kind of joked about that. Will has talked about it himself. Aziz Al-Shaair just told him during OTAs like, hey, quit beating yourself up. We got another play to go. So Dameon's he's in a better space. Whatever happened last year, he seems to have learned from it, and it looks that way on the field. This is Slowik on Joe Mixon, and I think I got the whole cut this time. Since we're talking about the run game, Joe Mixon, who Dameon said some nice things about too. Here is Bobby on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long talking about Joe Mixon.
There are some things in the pass game he could do that we're going to try to take advantage of that he's done through the course of his career. But schematically, a lot really won't change. What does change is just the way he runs it, how big he is, how fast he is, how physical he is.
There's Laramy Tunsil.
Yeah. We'll get to Laramy in a second. The GPS data, I know a lot of you weren't on the stream when we were talking about this. So they wear those little monitors that tells everybody how fast they ran, how many miles they ran, and all of that. I don't know if they do miles anymore. It's weird. Some of this high-tech stuff, they're still using like miles instead of kilometers and everything. I'm just having flashbacks to like spending an entire year learning the metric system when I was in third grade because it was coming down the pike. No metric system. I mean, not in America. There's the rest of the world can do it. They go die. We're staying imperial, baby. But so Joe Mixon's explosiveness, speed, everything, it sounds like it's still really good. I'd love to see it. I want them to be as careful as possible. The Texans did have an extra week of training camp already, so I don't think they're in any hurry for Joe Mixon to come in and do what he's already been doing for multiple years in the NFL. The one update I'd give you on the running back position is Cam Akers. So Cam Akers has taken some snaps as a running back. I haven't seen a whole bunch of them, but for a guy that's had 2 Achilles tendon tears and he's less than a year off of his last one, he tore his Achilles tendon again. The other one, you remember, he did the first one in 2021, was kind of disappointing after that. Didn't really get back to like his previous promise. Then went to Minnesota and showed some flashes, like showed some of his old explosiveness and everything. But didn't have a great year. He was averaged like 3.6 yards per carry in Minnesota. He had been averaging like 1.8 last season with the Rams before they picked him up. But then he tore his Achilles tendon in week 9. With all that, like he still looks pretty speedy. I am not relying on him one bit. I think he would probably start the season on the PUP, the physically unable to perform. Maybe not, but I think Jawar Jordan, Agumbawale, depending on how he figures in the kicking game. British, I want to like British Brooks. Like I really like the guy, man. He's got like Iron Head Hayward tendencies to him. He's just like a beefy dude. His name is British. Like I almost feel like he should be in a Guy Ritchie movie. It's a combination of him being like big and tough and being named British. So I'm looking at him like he's a Guy Ritchie character. And they've always got a couple of the extras, a couple of the minions that are like really lovable dudes. They've got like kind hearts, but they'll break your thumb if their boss tells them to. That's how I imagine him and envision him. I don't know if he's got the athleticism, so we'll see. He's a guy that really needs the people to be out there in pads trying to tackle him. If he can be like a short yardage back or a guy that he's not going to get you 9 yards, but he's going to get you 3 every time. He might have a chance there. And then depending on what he does in special teams, all of that. Jawar Jordan, I've talked about, up and down. You guys know that. So Chris Long asks about Laramy Tunsil. This is an interesting response from Bobby Slowik. I want you to listen to how much he stresses what type of blocking Laramy Tunsil is good at.
Most underrated offensive lineman in the NFL.
As a pass protector, I would say he's probably the best there is in the NFL right now.
Real quick, Chris had asked, is Laramy Tunsil the most underrated player in the NFL? So Bobby says, as a pass protector, he is.
In pass pro. I mean, he is hard to beat. What he did in our playoff game against Cleveland, I thought was exceptional. We gave him, I believe, almost no help all game, and Miles would still line up over there, and we counted on LT to be able to go block him, and he did.
Yeah. To start off with that, on the pass protection side of things, which Bobby made a point of saying as a pass blocker, yes, I hope this is the year that like Laramy really gets it in this system and just I mean, like he could be so freakishly good as a run blocker, if that desire and want to is there. I mean, he's a better athlete than Trent Williams, but I fear Trent Williams in space and run plays and on screens more than I do Laramy Tunsil. But as a pass protector, yeah, Laramy is ridiculously good, and what he's talking about is huge. Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons both. Laramy has pieced those guys up at times. Myles Garrett, there have been games where Myles Garrett barely ends up even rushing over Laramy Tunsil. I think he might have gotten shamed into staying over Laramy this last time, because I think I'll have to go down and look at the breakups. I remember looking at there have been some games where Myles Garrett just stays his ass over at left defensive end. But you hear about that? Like if people think you're ducking a guy in the defensive line meeting room, I don't care if you're Myles Garrett. I don't care if you're Deacon Jones. Maybe Deacon Jones. Okay, Deacon Jones never would have done it. Deacon Jones would have stayed his ass over the best guy, and he would have tried to break his trachea because it was legal then. It was encouraged almost. Then Tytus Howard as well. I think Bobby brought up Tytus Howard unprompted.
I'm really proud of Tytus. I think what he had to go through last year, he had to fight off the injury with the hand, so he lost a lot of time in training camp, missed some of the season, and then by the time he came back, George Fant, who was playing right tackle for us when he was out, was playing good football, and we needed inside help badly. And Tytus was willing to take that for us. And he went in and he played guard, good enough for us to go compete and go play. We know that's not his best position. He knows that's not his best position, but that's what was best for the team. And
yeah, so I thought Bobby does a really good job of kind of saying exactly the truth. And he can say that emphatically, but he also is not going to lie to anybody. And we all know, Tytus Howard knows it. Like, he's not good as a guard. And people make the mistake sometimes. And I used to worry that the Texans were making this mistake, but last year it was out of necessity. Sometimes people think, well, okay, if offensive tackles are more athletic and bigger and all of that, then they must be good guards, right? No, not even close. Like, a lot of times the very things that make an offensive tackle good are the things that'll hurt them or hinder them when they're down inside, especially if they're more finesse type guys or what have you. But you think about Will Anderson. Will Anderson's a great defensive end. How good would he be as a 3-4 nose tackle? He'd be horrendous. He's not. Yes, he's awesome as an end. He would get destroyed as a nose tackle. So there's some guys that are great offensive tackles and just don't have the knack for it at guard. It's like knife fighting in there, where out on the end, it's a little more elegant and it's sword fighting. It's just, it's a different game. So I think if you're down on Tytus, first ask yourself, wait a second, am I down on Tytus just because I watched him struggle at guard last year? And I believe a lot of people, I think that's what's happening, because a lot of people, when they make the comments to me about Tytus Howard, they'll talk about how bad he was last year. And it doesn't count. Like, you got to think about his work at right tackle, and he's done good stuff at right tackle. I think he's probably an underrated tackle in the league, partly just because people haven't seen him a whole lot. Okay, so getting to Lassiter, after Lassiter, it'll all be nothing but you and me, and the footage that I'd take and grabbed off the internet from practice yesterday. So Lassiter is obviously loved by DeMeco Ryans. It's just all DeMeco just is beaming when he talks about Lassiter. We've seen DeMeco mic'd up, just so excited about Kamari Lassiter. This is Kirby Smart telling how it all went down. And I know a lot of you have seen this, but a lot of you haven't. I knew about this clip, but I'd never actually watched the whole thing. But this is his college coach, Kirby Smart, talking about how Lassiter made the decision to play in the bowl game last year, even though he didn't have to. And even though a lot of guys, these days are sitting out of that last game before the draft if it doesn't count.
You see really quickly
what the hell?
Why he was able to do what he did. We're here in OTAs, and I mean, he's hitting things on the GPS that everyone's like, wow, that's incredible.
That's the third time. That's the third time that I've played that clip. So here's Kirby Smart I saw this real quick. YouTube Sunday Ticket is still on this year. Yes, it is. It is. It is. The lawsuit doesn't affect any of that.
Kamari Lassiter had a 1-2 grade, first, second round grade, and Kamari had to make a tough decision like all these other people. And I called Kamari in and I talked to him and I told him, Kamari, you should come out for the draft. That's my opinion. You're one of the top corners in the draft. You got to make that decision. Okay, that's one decision. Then the second decision is you got to decide if you want to play in this bowl game. I don't know that you got a lot to gain in this bowl game, Kamari, but I do know who you are. And I do know how you practice, and I do know how you lead. But I'm not going to be disappointed in anything you decide. He came back about 3 or 4 days later, and I met with him and his mom and talked to him and fully expected him not to play in this game. He called me 2 days later, said, Coach, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm sitting out. I'm over there coaching. I can't do it. I want to be out there. I want to play with my guys. And I think he did it against his mother's will, to be honest. Now, I don't know that, but I think he did it against his mother's will because that's who he is. So all these teams that go shopping, this dude right here wants to play football. That's all he cares about is playing football and his teammates. He ain't worried about the next thing and all that and all that. He said, I want to play football. And he played football for the University of Georgia. And he did it when he didn't have to do it. And that's what's different at this place than a lot of other places. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the vehicular issues, that's different there too. But other than that, those are the two things. Kamari Lassiter and those guys, they love the speed. Real quick, Tex Fan J, if you could just paste a link about that, because I haven't seen that, and I'm a little bit skeptical of it because, for one, the NFL is not tax exempt anymore. They changed that a few years ago. The other is that the whole thing about the NFL was it was a nonprofit, and it really didn't matter or affect them that much. It ended up being like a $1 million or $2 million per year that they would have saved in taxes. Because if you think about the NFL, people would hear that the NFL was tax exempt, and they would think that like NFL teams weren't paying taxes, which is not true. The NFL is a clearinghouse for the money. So the revenue comes in to the NFL, and then the revenue goes out to the owners, who are all business people who do whatever, some of them are shiesty Silicon Valley types that probably aren't paying taxes. Others are good, hardworking Americans like the McNair family, and they pay their taxes. But it was always blown up into something that was like easy to make it look like a big deal, but it was really, really stupid. It was really frustrating because politicians would do it all the time. In the NFL, which doesn't even pay taxes. I was like, right, it's like yeah. Like the NFL specifically wasn't run for profit. All the individual owners are running for profit. So but I'm curious. I'm curious if you saw that in an article or in a forum or something, because maybe I need to be educated. And it hasn't been tax exempt for a while now. So there are benefits they get in terms of antitrust laws and everything. Here, back to actual football. Here's Kamari Lassiter talking about when Landry asked him about that clip. This is Kamari Lassiter.
There was the viral clip of Kirby Smart praising you for deciding to play in the bowl game. A lot of guys in your position, they opt out. What went into that decision? Is that kind of what DeMeco and Caserio like about you when they talk about he just likes to play football? Yeah,
I mean, I eat, sleep, and breathe football. Football has been the love of my life since I was 3 years old. So, I mean, I had the opportunity to play in the game with my teammates, and I was fully healthy. So, I mean, they're in my brain, it was a no-brainer. Like, it's football. Why would I not play? So, other guys chose to make other decisions. That's neither here nor there. I respect the decision regardless because, everyone has to make a decision for themselves and their family and, their betterhood. But, my decision was to go out there and play football.
Yeah. So, he's gotten steadily better and more consistent. The first couple of days, there's some big separations at times, and those have gone down. He's done good. I mean, like one-on-ones, the defensive back wide receiver one-on-ones, it's so unfair. Like that is stacked in favor of the offense. The defense doesn't have any safety help. It's basically like running a cover zero blitz with no pass rush. and and no ability to disguise coverages or anything like that. So it's just there's double moves all over the place. So it's supposed to be a drill that you're working on stuff, and especially as a defensive back, you might want to be trying something that works or it doesn't work out. But then you do it in front of fans and then you put it on the internet and everything. And sometimes it creates an impression of a guy that's unfair because you see him get toasted by Tank Dell or something. Like, well, yeah, that's what happens when people cover Tank Dell. Diatribe over. Having said all that, and given the degree of difficulty, even in one-on-ones, I think Kamari Lassiter has continued to look better and better and better. And he's got all these opportunities to go against all these studs. It's been really cool. The other thing, too, and this is what people from University of Georgia told me, is what you read in the scouting report. He didn't have a boatload of interceptions, but you don't want to confuse that for him not having ball skills, because he's totally got ball skills. And some of it was just, I think, opportunities that he had or did not have in college and what have you. But like he's definitely got ball skills. We haven't talked as much about Bullock, but Bullock, you can see how good he is at tracking the ball in the air. He's missed a couple of interceptions that he could have had, but he's working with the twos more often, where Lassiter is just parked there on the right side at cornerback. I don't know, I don't know how much Derek Stingley will travel this year, because then Lassiter is getting all his work on the right side right now. Maybe they move him over to the left a little bit, but I don't, they'll figure some things out with all of that. Jalen Petrie playing slot. I need to watch it in games. It's an experiment I'm willing to observe, and we'll see. It's also hard because it's him. I think they're making it as hard as possible on him. So it's a lot of times it's Jalen Petrie in the slot at the line of scrimmage versus Stefon Diggs or versus Tank Dell. And I think maybe they're just giving him like, hey, this is as hard as it will ever be in the NFL, is that we're going to ask you to go up and jam one of these dudes or play physical with him at the line of scrimmage. And, after that, it'll be easy when we can play off the ball a little bit and we'll be in zone and all of that. So I'm not high or low on it right now. If it's the best way to bring some variety to the defense, and because then you can, it's a lot like blitzing from that slot position. It can create some possibilities, or him, bailing out to play safety when people are anticipating him as a slot. Like DeMeco, based on what happened at the end of last year, they started disguising coverages a lot more, getting a little bit more creative. That's what worked so well in that playoff game versus the Browns. So like he can be very valuable in that regard. So it's an experiment right now. We'll see. I'm looking forward to watching all these guys on Thursday night versus some actual NFL players. I don't know if Petrie and I don't know how many of the veterans will actually get chances, but we'll see. And just to follow up on that's all right, Tex Fan Jay. I honestly, I don't want to act like I'm a legal expert on it or anything. Like it gets all this stuff, man, this antitrust stuff with the Sunday ticket and all the other, it gets very, very confusing. That's all I know. Don't worry about the lawsuit, the DirecTV, the Sunday ticket lawsuit affecting the salary cap. Salary cap's based on gross revenue, not net profit. So now individual teams, if it turns out they got to pony up $400 million a piece, individual teams might be less likely to just like make big cash outlays on players because they might be cash strapped, but it shouldn't affect the salary cap. I don't want to say it's just a bump in the road, but look, we saw the NFL endure billions of dollars lost through COVID, and they seem to be doing all right now. I think they can spread out some lawsuit money over time if it actually goes through. Really cool to see Kamari look so comfortable taking questions. Oh, yeah, more likes. Thank you, Zach. I always forget this algorithm crap. You want to talk about algorithm stuff? I did a Cowboys video earlier. Depressing. Not just in doing the Cowboys video, but I want to try to do some more NFL type stuff, just to broaden the base a little bit. And that algorithm does not recognize me as a Cowboys person. It's a blow to my ego, man. It's a blow to my ego. It's a pretty good one. Like I'm basically trashing Jerry Jones the whole time. If you want to click on it, it's a quick 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 57 seconds. And I felt bad afterwards almost because I'm like, God, Jerry is an old man, but I don't think it's age that's the problem. He's been doing the same thing he's been doing every year since Jimmy Johnson left. So if I thought that it was old age or dementia creeping in or something, then I wouldn't have done the video. But I think it's just Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones. And I almost feel bad for Cowboys fans just because they're so deluded at this point. If we face them more often, I wouldn't feel bad about it. I would just feel bad about, I would delight in all of it. Let's see. Offense is mostly the same players as last year. Do you think the offense will take a step back, or do you think the last few practices or the infusion of talent on the defense taking stage? Let's see. Is it mostly the same? I guess in terms of the guys, the notable playmakers are still there, and Bobby Slowik is still there. I think CJ is going to be a different quarterback than he was last year. I think like CJ is going to improve as a quarterback. CJ himself knows that he still has things he's got to work on to just genuinely get to that greatness level. And he's showing all the signs that he's done it. I think like Stefon Diggs is an added player, but he's kind of a force multiplier. Joe Mixon is an added player. Like those are like the offensive line that remains the same aren't actually the same. I mean, I've already looked. We've got Joe Mixon, Stefon Diggs, Kenyon Green, who wasn't there, Juice Scruggs playing center. That's different. Tytus Howard playing right tackle. We're already up to almost 50% of the offense being new. So I do think that some of the youth right now on the offensive line, especially without Laramy Tunsil being out there, is causing some issues. But I'm not panicking about it at this point. It's just that there's like, yeah, they're facing a hyper aggressive defense that's got some defensive tackles that I think are going to be just fine this year. I know a lot of people are worried about the defensive tackles. The linebacking depth is still something to watch. I think it'll be great. Not that I'm happy Christian Harris is hurt, but Henry To'oTo'o is going to get some chance to get some heavy playing time in the preseason, going against starters, hopefully a lot of the time. At least this week for sure. I don't think Christian Harris is going to come out and all of a sudden be in a game right away. So Henry To'oTo'o has looked better. Al-Shaair just looks awesome. Just everything that he looks like on film, that's exactly what they got. No big surprise there. And then the competition at Sam linebacker will get really interesting, which is my project for tomorrow. Okay. Oh, I got to get going. I'm doing KHOU tonight. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. If you're new to the channel, I'm Seth Payne. I used to play for the Texans long ago. Now I'm on Sports Radio 610 every weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Only from 6 to 8 for these first 2 weeks of training camp, and then we're back up to 4 more hours. I got a new outro here. I'm excited about this. Oh, I was covering my face up that whole time. Who's gonna follow me? Looking like I'm wearing a mask. Here's my new outro. I'll get smoother with it over time. But since it always takes like three seconds for me to actually cut off at the end, I'm going to make it less awkward for all of us.
All good? All good.
Still a little awkward because I'm still there right there. But I just love that. Are we still here? We're still here. I hit end stream. You see?